أنا برسم بورتريه كبير وفي يعني عناصر فوق رسالة تضامن أو كرسالة تضامن للشعب الأمريكي ولقضية العنصرية كتضامن نحن كلنا إنسان يعني.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised.
Despite being oceans apart, the struggles of Black Americans and Palestinians grew in tandem throughout the 1960s. In 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO for short, was formed by uniting several resistance factions which had formed in the wake of the Nakba of 1948. 2 years later, in Oakland, California, college students Huey Newton and Bobby Seale started the Black Panther Party with the mandate to end police brutality, eventually developing the renowned 10-point program.
The 10-point program. Number one, we want freedom. We want the power to control the destiny of our black communities. Number two, we want full employment for our people. Number three, we want an end to the robbery by the white man of our black communities. Number four, we want decent housing fit to shelter human beings. Number five, we want education for our people that teaches us the true nature of this decadent American society. Education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present-day society. Number six, we want all black men to be exempt from military service. Number seven, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people. Number eight, we want all black people to be released from the many prisons, city, county, and state jails that they are now being held in. Number nine, we want all black people, when brought to court, to be tried by a jury of their peers or people from their black communities as defined in the Constitution. Number 10, we want land, justice, housing, education, clothing, and peace. And as a major political objective, a United Nations supervised plebiscite to be held throughout the black colonies of America, in which only black people will participate to decide or determine the will of black people as to their national destiny.
Both organizations came to prominence within their respective countries in 1967. The PLO for its guerrilla warfare campaign resisting the Zionist entity during the Six-Day War, in which hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and Syrians were displaced. And the Black Panther Party, the Free Huey Newton movement, following Newton's arrest on manslaughter charges for the death of a police officer, which occurred during a shootout. The same year, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee newsletter's first piece on the Third World featured a list of 32 facts about the occupation of Palestine, eventually publishing a formal statement condemning Zionism, the U.S. support of Zionism, and the suppression of Jewish voices that opposed the political movement. In 1968, the SNCC disbanded and the Panthers emerged as the leaders of the Black Power movement. Eldridge Cleaver, who oversaw the developing international section of the Black Panther Party, proclaimed alongside PLO leader Yasser Arafat that the Black Panther Party unequivocally supports the Palestinian people, their vanguard forces, and their struggle against the Zionist aggressor, and the glorious march of the Palestinian people to freedom, liberty, independence, and peace. From that moment, Black Palestinian solidarity was cemented.
I think your center had a very big success. And you showed to our population how a cultural expression could contribute to a political struggle.
The basis of the relationship between the movements has always invited comparisons and contradictions. In 1971, while addressing Palestinian students in Kuwait, Black Panther Donald Cox described the freedom fighters of the Fatah movement, the PLO's foremost resistance faction, as the revolutionary brothers of the party, while comparing young Black men radicalized by poverty and systemic racism in the US as their freedom-fighting comrades abroad. However, Huey Newton added that the Black Power movement in the US could not pursue nationalism in the same way that the Palestinian struggle did due to their inhabiting the imperial court.
I want to introduce a man who come over tonight from another part of town, but he's fighting for some of the same causes we're fighting for. The police brutality up here, there's rats and roaches. There's poverty up here. That's the first thing that we can unite on. That's the common thing we have, man. But I want you people to stick together, and I'll stick with Black Panther, and they'll stick with me, and I know they will.
The movements continued to grow along similar trajectories over the course of the 1970s, as their respective movements went about the work they had set out for within their communities. But much like they emerged in tandem, their movements would simultaneously lose momentum by the turn of the decade.
Lebanon, the most dangerous place on earth. A land torn apart by religious and political differences, for generations engulfed by bitter civil war. Once the pearl of the Middle East, now the violent vortex of regional conflict. In the 1970s, into the Lebanese countryside came the Palestinian army, determined to destroy Israel. From Lebanon, the PLO waged a campaign of terror and destruction against Israel. Israel, in turn, launched counterstrikes, further tearing at the fragile fabric of Lebanon. In 1982, Israel decided to finish the PLO once and for all. This is the story of Israel's invasion of Lebanon, of an attempt to obliterate a dangerous enemy, of the bloody conquest of Beirut, of the innocent civilians caught tragically in the middle, and of the horrible price paid when Israel changed from David to Goliath. Israel versus the PLO, the invasion of Lebanon.
1982 was a politically charged year for Palestinian solidarity, as Egypt and Israel completed the terms of their peace agreement by Israel withdrawing from the Sinai Peninsula. In June of 1982, Israeli forces invaded Lebanon, which was in the midst of its own civil war, making their way from the southern border to Beirut by August. Several months into the war, the PLO, including leader Yasser Arafat, was forced to withdraw its presence in Beirut, where it had been strengthening its operations for decades. 8,000 members of the PLO were forced to relocate to Tunisia, while Arafat was exiled from Lebanon on a ship to Greece, in a deal negotiated by the Reagan administration.
Say you are more near from Palestine than before.
Politically, I am very near with my people to our target.
Can you explain to me?
No, I prefer to let actions speak, because actions speak louder.
Are you optimistic today?
I'm always optimistic. As to be in the revolution, you must be optimistic.
What sign are you of Rahman?
I'm a freedom fighter in the Palestinian revolution.
After consolidating its membership in Oakland, California, while preparing for Bobby Seale's failed bid for mayor in 1973, many members of the Black Panther Party returned to their homes elsewhere in the country, their disillusionment compounded by the increasingly erratic behavior of party leadership.
We didn't have any more fights, any more struggles to be at the helm of. He sorely missed the activity of the 60s.
In 1974, many party leaders, including Seale, were expelled by Huey Newton, who was said to be increasingly paranoid due to the FBI's COINTELPRO operation.
They destroyed him. The FBI and the law enforcement bodies destroyed him to a point where he became paranoid. And he was no longer the Huey that I ever knew. J. Edgar Hoover did everything to split the Black Panther Party.
Newton, meanwhile, fled to Cuba for 3 years facing murder charges, which were eventually dismissed. Newton's cult of personality overtook the mission of the party.
I will not allow this reactionary establishment to break my will. And I think that once your will is broken, then not only have they received a victory, but they've wiped out your whole reason for living.
By 1982, the Black Panther Party had seen its membership decline to fewer than 30. The only operation that remained active was the Oakland Community School, which closed that year.
A man whose name became synonymous with black militancy in the 1960s was shot to death early this morning in Oakland, California. Huey Newton, a co-founder of the Black Panther Party, had been shot several times. He was 47. Here's ABC's Brian.
After a tumultuous 80s, key figures of the PLO and the Black Panther Party appear to have grown less certain of the convictions they once held. By 1993, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, still led by Arafat, signed the Oslo Accords in Norway, which formed a de facto Palestinian government while normalizing the Israeli Zionist entity's presence in settlements it had formed in 1967. The accord marked a departure from the PLO's demands for a fully liberated Palestine 3 decades earlier and ultimately positioned them as a barrier to liberation for other resistance factions. The Black Panther Party was not succeeded by a Black Power movement of the same scale.
I'm thankful that I've had an experience that has enlightened me to the beauty and the greatness of the United States of America and its people. There was a time when I would not have been able to utter those words that I've just stated.
The resurgence of neoconservatism under Ronald Reagan and his infamous war on drugs terrorized Black communities, with their effects being felt well into the new millennium.
Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children. From the beginning of our administration, we've taken strong steps to do something about this horror. Tonight, I can report to you that we've made much progress. 37 federal agencies are working together in a vigorous national effort. And by next year, our spending for drug law enforcement will have more than tripled from its 1981 levels.
The revolutionary spirit in Black communities, however, was not dead. Many former members of the Black Panther Party continued organizing, raising consciousness and fostering the conditions for the emergence of new movements.
In the Circuit Court of the 18th Judicial Circuit in and for Seminole County, Florida, State of Florida versus George Zimmerman, verdict, We, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all four-person.
Since the establishment of Black Lives Matter in 2013, and since the 2014 war on Gaza, there was a result of people documenting their oppression on social media, where it could reach corners of the world previously unimaginable.
This is what community looks like.
You are in the streets, blocking the roadway. You are unlawfully assembled. You need to disperse immediately or you will be subject to arrest. Do it now.
When protests erupted in Ferguson, Missouri, following the extrajudicial murder of 18-year-old black man Michael Brown, Ferguson police demonstrated a level of militarization that resembled the country's actual armed forces. When the Ferguson police released a video showing Brown stealing cigarillos in an attempt to justify his murder, protesters were rightfully outraged, resulting in the Missouri governor calling a state of emergency and calling in the National Guard. Palestinians recognized the traits of militarized rule being imposed in Ferguson. After all, the US was supplying tear gas canisters to Zionist police and military forces in the West Bank of Palestine. They responded on Twitter by sharing advice on how to neutralize tear gas and minimize its effects with protesters. The following year, Dream Defenders, a US-based abolitionist group, and Black Lives Matter delegates traveled to Palestine to reciprocate solidarity with Palestinians living in the refugee camps of the West Bank. During their learning exchange, the organizers found mirrored struggles in US calls for prison abolition and Palestinian calls for boycott, divestments, and sanctions of the Zionist entity, which both targeted companies like G4S, which operated prisons in both countries, where both Black and Palestinian people were respectively incarcerated at disproportionate rates.
It's important for us to be here today because we see oppression happening all over the place, you know, and I think like if we allow oppression to continue to happen without saying nothing, then it's going to continue to exacerbate.
And why is it important to bring your kids here today? Why you want them to be here today?
I always tell them to be on the right side of history, you know, and absolutely, and because the things that's happening in Palestine are the things that we've also been subjected to, you know, in our time in America here as well. And so I tell my kids to understand what's going on in this country and let them know that, give them a quote that Malcolm X said, you know, the media will have you praising the oppressor and shaming the oppressed. And so I just want my kids to be mindful of, you know, how Palestinians stood up for us and spoke about Black Lives Matter, that we also got to speak up for them as well.
The solidarity between Black and Palestinian liberatory movements has arrived at its most principled form yet, unified in the struggle against colonialism, imperialism, and racism, owing to its roots in the coalition formed by the Black Panther Party and the Palestinian Liberation Organization 60 years ago.
I'ma bring y'all back to earth. It's black back to burn. Bullshit y'all talking about out your mouth. I'm not concerned cause y'all got.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it?
Now! What do you want?
Justice!
When do you want it?
Now!
I'm exhausted. Last night I couldn't sleep, but when I did I could hear bombs in my dreams. Nightmare situation. How could they be so evil, making martyrs out of children and innocent people? We expect the bombs, not knowing where next. Huddle in the corner of my room, trying to protect my little brother as the building shakes like it's possessed, but nothing stronger than the will of the oppressed. I bomb back with my lyrics and rhymes, living the times trying to break the Palestinian minds. What's hiding in the clouds hanging over my head? My dad risks his life outside to buy bread. The fourth war in my 12th year. At this stage I'm numb, though I haven't felt scared. There's nothing I can do in this case to stay safe. I'm brave, Even though this house could be in my grave, I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing is ever changing. That's life under an occupation. I want freedom for the population. 2 million